All right, the sprint to November is on, and we've got you covered as we dive into everything people, power, and politics. Thanks for staying up late with us. I'm Roop Raj. Metro Detroit is in the spotlight tonight when it comes to politics, so let's roll. A political analyst says this week's primary was, quote, a snoozer. So we're getting a pulse check on if that kept you home from the polls. Plus, a Republican and Democratic strategist are talking all things policy now that both sides are set with their presidential race and their tickets. All of that's coming up in a few moments here. But do I really need to tell you what the biggest story of the day is? I didn't think I did. Dueling rallies involving the Republican vice presidential nominee and the entire Democratic ticket in town. Kamala Harris, Tim Walz, and JD Vance all in Metro Detroit today trying to drum up support and get your vote. The day started in Macomb County. Vance speaking at this private event held at the Shelby Township Police Department. Now, here's the thing. It was a private event, but media was allowed to cover it. Vance played to that crowd, saying the Harris ticket doesn't support law enforcement like he and former President Trump do. Take a listen.
The failure to protect our communities is a law and is a policy choice. It is a policy choice to defund the police, which is what Kamala Harris wants to do. It is a policy choice to open up the American southern border and allow migrant criminals to come into this community and make it less safe. It is a policy choice to not deport people, to suspend deportations, which is what Kamala Harris did.
Okay, there's a lot of important things talked about there, but this was an interesting one. This soundbite has everybody in the country talking, and the question came from none other than our own Charlie Langton. You see, Charlie brought up how Vance has been criticized for being too serious and asked Vance what makes him smile, what makes him happy. This was his response.
Well, I smile at a lot of things, including bogus questions from the media, man. I mean, look, I think if you watch a full speech that I give, I actually am having a good time out here, and I'm enjoying this. But look, sometimes you got to take the good with the bad. And right now, I am angry about what Kamala Harris has done to this country and done to the American southern border. And I think that most people in our country, they can be happy-go-lucky sometimes, they can enjoy things sometimes, and they can turn on the news and recognize that what's going on in this country is a disgrace.
It was a time that some of these candidates show a lot of personality, and the question that Charlie asked wasn't unfair. I've had the chance to interview former President Trump a few times. I've gotten a lot of smiles from him, and so you know what you do as a reporter, as an anchor, you stick your neck out there and you try to ask a question that perhaps will get an answer that you wouldn't otherwise hear on cable news. Something Charlie tried to do successfully, and it gave him an opportunity to really talk about what separates him from the other ticket. And now to that other ticket, the Harris-Walz side of it. They spoke at the Signature Aviation Hangar in Northline in Detroit. Walz was on the stage a little after 7:30 this evening. He was introduced by big names like Governor Gretchen Whitmer, Congresswoman Slotkin, and Senator Debbie Stabenow. And right away, he took aim at the Trump-Vance side of the ticket, saying they're taking the joy out of America and urged Democrats to get out and vote to protect their freedoms.
I do have to tell you something about hope. My wife always tells me this. It's not a damn plan. We can't hope we beat this guy. We can't hope that things get better. We go out and work our butts off to make sure it happens. So when our next president walks out here and she talks about freedom, she means the freedom to make your own health care decisions. And when she comes out here and talks about that our children should be free to go to school without being shot dead in their classrooms.
Just moments after you heard him, VP Harris took the stage shortly before 8 o'clock tonight. She thanked President Biden for his service to the nation and then talked about her career as a prosecutor, comparing Trump to the people she's dealt with in those roles.
I took on perpetrators of all kinds. Predators who abused women, fraudsters who ripped off consumers, scammers who broke the rules for personal gain. So hear me, Detroit, when I say, I know Donald Trump's type. I've been dealing with them my whole career.
On this show, you hear both sides. You heard Vance basically talking a little bit about Harris's record and Biden's record when it comes to the border, and you just heard her there. Here's something you'll remember from the primary last spring. Remember the push to vote uncommitted for President Biden in the presidential primary over his response to the war in Gaza? It got a lot of clicks, a lot of headlines. Well, with Harris being in town, this group is back in the spotlight as well. They say they want to meet with VP Harris before endorsing her for president, saying a ceasefire in Gaza needs to happen.
This movement has always been about policy shift, about policy change, about saving Palestinian lives in the immediate.
Our government here in the United States, unfortunately, is not a neutral actor when we're talking about negotiations around a ceasefire. Our government is actually sending more and more bombs as our leaders are telling us they're trying to stop the bombs. There's an inherent contradiction there.
I'm a Palestinian myself. I have family that live in occupied West Bank, and I hear the stories.
You better believe 100,000 uncommitted votes had a lot of politicians, including Trump and Harris, taking pause. By the way, here's the latest Real Clear Politics average of polls for the race between Harris and Trump. Razor thin, but it's been flipped. Harris leads by a half percentage point right now at 47.4. Trump at 46.9. This is the latest poll that everybody's talking about right now. But as you know, polls change. People's pulses on things change, their stances change, and we're going to be here for every moment of it up until Election Day and beyond. I want to check back in on the vote that happened yesterday. There was a race that wasn't called when we talked last night, and the results look a lot different than they did 24 hours ago. We're talking about the 13th Congressional Democratic primary. Detroit Congresswoman Mary Waters versus Tenedar, and of course, Shakira Hawkins. Sri Tenedar wanted to keep his seat, and it looks as though that's exactly what he's going to do with 42,000 votes. That's 98% of the votes counted, which basically tells you this is the final vote. 54% of the vote for Sri Tenedar, Mary Waters with 34% of the vote. Waters, of course, arguing that the people of Detroit deserve to have black representation in Washington, and ultimately the people who went out and voted, 42,000 of them, said they liked the job that Sri Tenedar had done thus far. Well, that sets up a 2022 rematch between Tenedar and former business liaison Martell Bivings. Tenedar beat Bivings by more than 110,000 votes in 2022. Bivens was uncontested in the Republican primary. We'll have to see how this one ends up. Switching to the race for Senate, and these two races were called pretty early. As expected, no surprise here, Democratic Congresswoman Alyssa Slotkin will square off against Republican Congressman Mike Rogers, trying to take over the retiring seat of Senator Debbie Stabenow. Both handily won their primary contest. The latest Real Clear Politics average of polls for that race shows Slotkin leading by a little less than 6 points right now. But keep in mind, those were all before yesterday's vote. We had the chance to speak with Oakland University political science professor Nicole Matthew about this matchup.
It will be probably one of the most expensive and hard-fought Senate races this November, just because there aren't that many races up. Michigan's a swing state. It's going to be hard-fought for the presidential race also, so there's going to be a lot of money and attention focused on Michigan.
There was a lot on the ballot for you to vote on yesterday. And if you're looking for a specific race that we haven't talked about on our newscast or on this show, just head to our website, fox2detroit.com, and look for the results right there. We'll have the full results posted on the website. You know, we talked with one political consultant who called yesterday's primary, quote, a snoozer, because none of the races were really that competitive. Well, we wanted to ask you, did you vote yesterday? Here now is a pulse check.
Voted a while ago. It's our civic duty, right? So it's so important to vote. It's important for us to get our voices heard. It's important for us to make sure that what we want to see happen and what we want to see happen in the future actually does happen. And the only way to do that is by voting.
Is there any reason why you missed the primary?
No, I just haven't been able to get to it.
Just to get your opinion out there, no.
Yeah, I just think it's something that doesn't realistically take that much time, and it can make a pretty big impact.
Maybe a civic duty, but it's the duty of a politician to inspire people to get out to the polls and vote. Did they do that? Well, you saw the results behind us just a few moments ago. We put that question on fox2detroit.com. Here's a look at some of our results so far. By the way, from the Motor City to D.C., you know what? The tickets are set. So let's get into the weeds as we talk policy here. Democratic strategist Alexis Wiley and Republican strategist Jason Cable-Rowe staying up late on the pulse to join us in the hot seat. Good to see you, both of you. Thanks for joining us here tonight.
Thanks for the invite.
All right, so we know Michigan is nerve central. It's the most important, one of the most important places, arguably, in the country. Harris coming to town today with Walz, talking about labor, looking for labor support, having the endorsement under her belt. How much does that change for rank and file workers who are working on the lines to say, okay, Sean Fain told me I should vote for this person, now I should? Do you think that's how they think?
You know, I don't know completely. I mean, I think there is a little bit of diversity of thought in terms of, like, you know, they're not going to necessarily do exactly what their labor leader says, but I really do think what the vice president has been able to do is really harness that energy and excitement. People are excited to support her. They're excited to support her policies and really to see her become president of the United States, right? Like, she's given us hope that we didn't have a few weeks ago, to be completely honest.
But what happens when the excitement runs dry and the fervor goes away and we're just left talking about policy? How hard will it be for her to defend some of the practices by the Biden-Harris administration that have led to inflation and other issues during the administration?
You know, I think that there's been some misinformation out there in terms of really underplaying what this administration has done. When you think about the creation of jobs, the investment in clean energy, the investment in making sure that we're protecting women's rights and reproductive freedom, the work that's been that we often say that Joe Biden did, also Kamala Harris, she owns that too.
And the reproductive rights piece of this was definitely something that they put her in front of.
Absolutely.
Whenever you think about Harris, people want to talk about the border on the right, but if you think about reproductive rights and how she stood in front of it, she's really been quite the mouthpiece for that. So we asked you, Jason, a big visit like this, the fervor, the hundreds of millions of dollars that Harris has been able to build in historic amount of time, does that give reason for Republicans to take pause and say, wait a minute here, this is a real contender?
It should. I agree with Alexis. The change to Harris from Biden gives Democrats hope, because I would say one of the biggest problems that the Democrats had with Biden at the top of the ticket was a lack of enthusiasm, whereas Republicans maybe lacked the campaign infrastructure to compete with what Democrats had. Democrats lacked that enthusiasm, and typically it's easier to fix infrastructure than it is to fix enthusiasm, but they pulled a rabbit out of their hat with this one. So I do think that changes things. I also think it shores up some of the weaknesses within the Democratic coalition. You started to see black voters, particularly black men, trending towards Trump when it was him versus Biden. I think she'll still struggle a little bit there more in this current. But then with young people, when you saw Trump polling even and in some polls leading amongst Gen Z voters, a group that Biden won by over 20 points last time around, that shows some real weakness. And I think there's an opportunity for a reset with Muslim voters and those that care about what's going on in Gaza.
Well, right now we know there was 100,000 undecided voters that came right from here, right? And so many of them in Metro Detroit said, we want to make a statement to Biden that this is not okay. 38,000 plus lives lost in Gaza. Jason, Kamala Harris and Joe Biden, how closely will the Trump administration and Republicans try to tie them together to say, hey, they're no different? And is Kamala Harris different when it comes to the Middle East?
We don't know yet. We don't think so, but so far she's gotten away with a few weeks of not having to really say anything about anything. I do think that she is tethered to Biden, and that most polls that you look at in Michigan and nationally, top two issues, immigration and inflation. Those two things, she is tethered to Biden, and there's no escaping that. If Republicans are smart, they would focus on those messages, because that's what voters care about right now, and that's an advantage that Republicans have, significant advantages over Harris.
Democrats are smart, strategists are smart. What do they say? What do they do in order to try to kind of peel away the Harris and Biden agendas?
You know, I actually don't think there was ever a problem with the president's agenda, right? I think people just weren't enthusiastic about the president being the candidate, right? So now you've peeled away the candidate. I think she can have a full-throated ownership of the great agenda, the great things that have been done. When you think about the jobs created, you think about black unemployment being at record lows, you think about what's been done to protect prescription health care and access to prescription drugs to keep people healthy. Those are all things that people care about. I think you're going to see her lean into what's happened and make it very clear when the Republicans try to make it all about the border. She's going to be able to say, look, let me give you some real facts around what happened at the border. And let me also tell you about what else I've done to protect reproductive freedom, to create jobs, and really she's going to try to own a lot of the agenda, and then also educate people on who she is. She's a prosecutor, right? She's a fighter. She is someone who is law and order and has done an extraordinary job and has a great history. I think you're going to see her nail these messages and keep this momentum up, and I think every Democrat I've talked to says we only got a few more months of this and we're going to make it through.
We only have a few more minutes in this interview, but I wanted you to touch a little bit on a really important topic, because I like what you said. You're making the case in many ways, but there's one thing that's missing. That is people's pocketbooks. And I go out almost every other day and talk to people out on the streets to get the pulse of what they think. And black and white voters have told me that they believe they're better off under Trump when it comes to their pocketbook, grocery prices, gas prices, how safe they felt in terms of the global landscape and wars. How does someone argue that and push back against Trump when people believe that they're voting on their pocketbooks?
You know, I think that we actually have to talk to people about, really, when you think about, we actually are doing better than we were before. And I do think the pocketbook issues are critical. Inflation has not gotten to where it needs to be. We are all feeling that. We are all hurting. But when you think about things like investing in childcare, you talk about the things that have been done to try to give some relief, right? There's only so much I think that government can do when it comes to driving down all of the different market forces.
But spending is one of those things that you can do. You can try to cut your spending, and we know that there's many people out there who accuse Democrats of having an open checkbook and just going on a spending frenzy, a shopping spree, so to speak, for packages about things that matter. But Jason, what is it that you think JD Vance and Trump can do to really talk about the pocketbook? How do they attract union workers who are struggling to put food on the table in many cases?
Well, I think they need to stop talking about things that are outside of the scope of policy and talking about the things that are. You know, Alexis made reference to things going well in the economy. It's not the things that everyday people feel. It is the elites telling them that there are economic indicators that people that watch CNBC care about, but it's not the things that people that are watching NBC care about.
The cost of milk,
if it is the cost of your groceries, the cost of gas, the cost of home heating, just making ends meet. And when they hear people saying, oh, things are great, no matter what you think, they're great, and you're looking around saying, then why is it harder for me to make ends meet? We've got right now the government telling the taxpayers that they need to tighten their belt while the government refuses to tighten theirs. We're at a $35 trillion debt. That's over $120,000 for every man, woman, child in this country. It's unsustainable.
That'll take your breath
and
away.
It's driving inflation.
That number will take your breath away, regardless of if you're red or you're blue. But the final question to you is about decorum and decency. We've heard.
Do we do that anymore?
They were supposed to. This country is built on some ideas that perhaps we can agree to disagree and still respect each other. The two of you have done that, and that's why we love having you two on the show. But I do want to ask you, with 30 seconds left here, Donald Trump talks about unity. But why is it that this DEI case is still being, in many circles on social media and outside of that, on podcasts and conservative hosts, still bringing up the fact that she's a black or an Indian woman, and which one is she? None of that really matters to people's pocketbooks or anything else for that matter. What needs to change?
Well, I think part of the problem is with Biden. They had 5 or 6 years to refine their messages and their attacks and their critiques, and all of a sudden they've got a new character and they don't have that time. So I think they're just throwing everything at the wall and trying to figure out what sticks. You know, with Trump, sometimes something sounds stupid, and a couple months later it is part of the vernacular of the campaign. Who knows how it'll develop here, but we're not going to win talking about DEI. We are about inflation and immigration.
Let's hope that what they throw against the wall will be policy points on both ends, even if they be some really damning words about the other party, because that's what people care about on the other side of that camera. Jason, good to see you. Alexis, always good to see you. Thank you both for joining us here on The Pulse, covering people, power, and politics. It's a big week for one party. 3 weeks into her newly minted campaign, VP Kamala Harris mulls over the most important decision she'll make as a candidate who wants the keys to the White House. There were 4, then there were 2, then there was 1. Her VP choice. That's news. VP Harris is a Democrat. We spent many minutes talking about that decision, teaching people about it, and we even asked you what your thoughts were. We always want people, regardless of where they stand, to chime in, red or blue or purple. We want to hear from you, and we mean it when we say it. But when people ask rhetorically, why would you cover this? Or, as some people here say, nobody cares. Other people, please don't come to Detroit or Michigan. We aren't elevating political discourse. We're not just insulting the candidates, which you have a right to do. More importantly, we're mocking our neighbors, our coworkers, our family members who are voting for the ticket that we don't like. Look, this week has been heavy on Harris coverage on this show, on these newscasts. Whether you're a fan or a foe of her ideas, her policies, or if you dislike former President Trump, you have a right to chime in. But to question why we're bothering to cover Harris's visit or JD Vance's visit, which is happening today, you're saying there's no room for any ideas outside of the ones you believe in. Last time I checked, that doesn't sound like America. Not like the America I know. And as for the media, I can't speak for the thousands of newspapers, TV stations, networks, social media outlets that cover the news. I can tell you on this show, this news station, we will cover this race with every visit, every speech, every handshake, red or blue. Not because we like them or dislike them, not because one's a man and one's a woman, but because you, the viewer, deserve to hear from them and make up your own mind.